All right, good evening. It is 7 o'clock on September 5th. Welcome to the Whitestown Redevelopment Commission meeting. Would like to go ahead and start the meeting with a call to order. No, roll call, excuse me. Dax?
Yes.
Roll call, please.
Adam Hess. Here. Brian Bracken.
Here.
Megan Swain. Clinton Baum.
Howdy.
Kyle Weathers.
Present.
I'd like to go ahead and move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to the newest member of the commission as well. Before we move on to the public request for speak, would like to go ahead and see if there's a motion to amend the agenda. We have a couple things that we'd like to add, including an MOU with NDOT and also the addition of another liquor license for
Noble Romans.
Noble Romans. So is there a motion for that?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
I'd like to go ahead and call that for a vote. So those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion carries. Number 2 on the agenda is the public request to speak.
You're just not that likable. Sorry.
Seeing none, we'd like to go ahead and move on to unfinished business, which item A is to discuss the tax abatement application matrix. If you're aware from looking at some of your previous minutes in the past, or if you remember some previous minutes, this is something I said that I would undertake. Sincerely apologize. Life happens and wasn't able to make much progress on that, but willing, if anyone else has any other ideas while we move through this, happy to help provide input to me or to Dax or anyone else along the way.
I think that it's something that Molly and me, sorry. I think it's something we can work on, Brian. I think that there are enough examples out there, and I know you see them too in your profession. Adam may see them as well in what you two do in economic development field. But why don't we do this? Molly and I can start to get a template and get examples, and we'll present to you, and then we can go from there. It almost is a workshop, in my opinion, sometime towards December, January, February. A workshop where it's a 2-hour session, and we come out of it with pretty good matrix for tax abatement application scoring, if you will. I think it was who just did one? Somebody just did one.
Greenfield did.
Yeah, Greenfield did. So it's not unheard of. We can't continue to, in my opinion, rubber stamp an abatement without a lot deeper thought. And I know that that's what it's become. That's the incentive it's become. Like I said in the IBJ, it's become more of a vital ingredient in the cake instead of just the icing, and we've got to be careful about that. So I'll do something, and I'll send something to the Redevelopment Commission for the October meeting.
That'd be great. And moving on to the next business along the same lines, it also includes a discussion of SP1 and CF1 approval forms. And I think the last meeting that we actually had is we actually approved some of the CF1 forms that were submitted to the town. So this kind of goes along in the same light with that, as far as when every year when companies receive a real or personal property tax abatement, they submit that statement of benefits or the compliance forms and to the RDC and to the town. We review those and make recommendations to the council. So hopefully that'll go along with that same planning.
Yeah, that could probably be the same meeting.
Yep.
So.
Any questions and comments on either the tax abatement matrix or the CF1 forms?
I do look forward to coming with a product from those meetings. I think this will be something that's very beneficial for the town to see, and also will give a chance for the public to see kind of the things that we're thinking of and what we're seeing. You know, I always appreciate it when members of the public get to see what we can allow them to see, so that they can get an idea of what goes into our decision making.
Yeah, absolutely. It's important to say that these are going to be more like guidelines too, where it's important to have that flexibility, because not all projects are created equal, even though you always try to heavily weight things on investment and jobs, but also there's some particular areas that make a little more sense to incentivize something or maybe not, depending on what that particular project. So thank you for doing that, Dax. Looking forward to be a part of that.
It's on the list of goals for the year on my whiteboard, and we're going through those rapidly. I'd like to get it done, so well, maybe November, December, we'll hold a workshop and come out on the other side with a good product.
Sounds great.
Okay.
Seeing no other question, comments, we'd like to go ahead and move on to new business. And
Mr. President, point of order, we skipped over approval of meeting minutes for 6/13.
Yes, we need to table those. I need to get those back around. A little mishap with those. My apologies.
Move to table.
is there a second? Second. All those approve say aye.
Aye.
Those say nay. Thank you, Clinton. Minutes have been tabled until October. Moving back along, for new business under item A is to consider a resolution pledging certain tax increment revenues to the payment of economic development revenue bonds to the town of Whitestown, which is resolution 2017-11. Did receive the resolution in your packet, so hopefully everyone's had a chance to review that. Dax is here to kind of talk a little bit more about that and the process, and also maybe some. We also have Terry McCardwell here from GDI that can talk a little bit more about the expenditures for that project as well. So, Dax, would you mind just giving
Sure.
a quick overview?
And Dennis, you can step in and help if I miss something. Not an unheard of or unprecedented ask from the development community to the EDC, RDC, and Town Council. What's being asked of you all is work successfully in Whitestown with Perry Industrial, Maple Grove. I would say that Anson will eventually get there someday. Obviously, Whitestown did not approve that. That was a county approval. But the mechanism is so that the taxpayers aren't on the hook. A developer will come to us and ask you all to fund through increment. They'll ask the EDC to approve the bonds in the council. You're being asked to fund via the increment a bond so that they can get started on development process. This particular bond is $6 million. What you have in front of you, you have some items that support this resolution. You have a list of cost estimate from the developer themselves. You have a site map of the site, and then you have the resolution itself. That list of costs basically is what, when the construction happens, that's what this will pay for. So Terry McCardwell is here from GDI. I'll let him explain a little bit about the project. And I would hopefully that you would all ask him questions of what's being funded, why it's being funded, what's the return on investment, which I think is very important for us. This TIF, if I remember correctly, we set it up as a 70-30.
That's right.
So a new thing that we're doing as a community, I don't think a lot of communities are doing this, is we're starting to set our TIFs up that they don't capture 100% of the increment. 70% gets captured, 30% gets filtered onto the taxing units. I like that. So a con of that is if a developer does ask us to do an economic development revenue bond, it may take a little longer to pay for the debt service because you're having a smaller amount of revenue coming in. And it ties up that increment for a while until the developer really truly gets built out, which I think this particular developer will do. I've seen them be successful in other areas. The more buildings they build, the more increment coming in, the more that doesn't have to get used for just this one particular debt service and can get passed on to other projects. In this bond, there is set aside $300,000 for improvements to a park here in town, a new one. Now it's a park that'll be phased. It's off of Main Street. We call it the 7-acre park right now. I'm grateful that the developer was agreeable to having this be inside the bond and passed on to the Parks Department and the Town Council for use to start phase 1 of this particular park. So I'll yield my time and I'll yield the floor to Terry McCardwell from GDI.
Thanks, Dax, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to be here and to consider this. I've been in front of you before and appreciate all of your support thus far. Fischbach Creek Business Park is a 200-acre business park across the street from Anson. And there we intend to, and we have master planned to be able to develop about approximately 3 million square feet of buildings. And total value for those 3 million square feet, we think, will be in the neighborhood of $150 million. So it is a substantial, significant investment on our part. Also, though, have the need for some infrastructure improvements, especially with the County Road 500. And so this TIF bond will allow us to make those infrastructure improvements. Before you see a rendering of our first building that we intend to build, and we hopefully will start this building very quickly, yet this summer, fall. And we've tried to do a little bit different architectural design with the building. Most buildings are pretty flat precast panels. In this one, we've put some abstract design to help give it some relief, and I think give it a nice architectural feature. So we're excited about the project. We're excited about doing business in Whitestown. We're pleased that we're able to partner with you and also make a contribution to the parks through the $300,000. And, that's significant, I think, and hopefully that's a good start for you with this park. So if there's any questions, happy to entertain them. But again, I just want to say thank you for the support and look forward to continuing to be a part of the Whitestown community.
Well, thank you, Terry, and thank you for your partnership. Willing to, be a partner here with the town of Whitestown, invest quite a bit and able to help bring additional revenue to the town with new businesses. A couple questions. I think asking for about a $6 million bond for additional infrastructure improvements of some roads. So looking for County Road 500 and Albert S. White and some utilities. Also see some information about internal connecting drive. Would that be for this particular facility or for a few others? Or
For a few others. This first facility will be one of 3 on that side of the street.
Okay.
And so that connector road will connect 500 to Albert S. White Boulevard.
Okay. And the same thing with the utilities, that would be for the 200-acre park instead of just for this facility?
Some utilities will be a part of this, but then there'll be other utility needs as we develop out the park.
Okay. Is there any questions for Terry?
Could you clarify that real quick? On here, you've listed $1.7 million for utility costs, and that is your estimate for the entire park's build-out, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And is this all of the utility costs that are going to be incurred by the project?
By the 200-acre project, yes.
Okay, so then the intent is for this bond to then cover 100% of the utility investment necessary to get these projects moving?
Well, correct, along the roads, the County Road 500, Albert S. White, utility extensions.
How long do you think it'll take you to build proposed building A and B?
Let me just look at this.
This is the building we're talking about today, right, that you're,
We're actually talking about this building.
oh, okay, sorry.
Half of this building will be 400,000 square feet.
Okay,
Here's the second building. So this would be 2.
okay.
And I don't know if I answered your question. To build that building would be approximately 9 months.
And then what do you anticipate the build-out time for all 3 buildings?
I would say, hopefully we would probably in the next 3 years, 1 a year.
I personally think this is a great project. Still have a little heartburn on assisting with the utility costs for the entire development. especially when we see this more as a long-term play. Typically, we like to help get utilities and infrastructure to the actual site instead of plan for the entire build-out. But also, it's great to have additional inventory here. This is something that the Boone EDC and the Indian Partnership has talked about, the lack of inventory throughout central Indiana. So there are definitely pros and cons there.
Can I ask a question about the connector road again?
Sure.
Or can you show me where the connector road is on this site plan?
You're right there.
Oh, okay.
See, this site plan unfortunately is not the most current, but that connector road will come right down through here.
Okay. So but it's really just to serve as access to here, to these two buildings.
Well, it'll provide additional point of ingress egress to this building.
Okay.
Get out here and then also here.
Perfect. All right. Thank you.
There'd be a curb cut for that interconnector too?
Um,
Curb cuts would be up here, and then we'll also have to utilize this curb cut. Another reason for the importance of that connector road, because we won't be allowed another median cut on Albert S. Way. So the access will be through this direction and out.
Yeah. Oh, okay. All right.
I didn't see in the breakdown of the cost, but will any of the proceeds from the bond, will that go to building or having pads for the other two buildings?
no.
Okay. And what type of users do you envision for these three buildings?
We, continue to envision the types of users that we're seeing in the park now with, Brooks just recently announced, similar type of e-commerce type facilities. Also, I think it's possible that we could have some light manufacturing facilities. We've made a variety of proposals to manufacturing companies. So I think we're not entirely locked into warehousing and distribution. In fact, we'd like to see the manufacturing happen here as well.
We certainly would too when you talk about the payback for all the cost to develop infrastructure for the site. Any other questions for Terry while we have him here?
Is this, there's a lot of linear feet here, and in a site plan that seems that has changed. Is there a way that we can look at how the utilities are being planned throughout these three buildings?
Well, again, make sure I've communicated adequately. The utilities would be really to serve the park as opposed to specific buildings. And the utilities would be those that would run along the Albert S. White, and then also 500, any extensions there, and the interior. So they wouldn't necessarily, I want to make sure you understand that we're not trying to, build utilities that would be a part of our individual buildings. That wouldn't be the case, but rather public-type utility improvements out there.
It might be good to have a drawing to show that.
Yeah, and we've got it. Unfortunately, I know we were scrambling at the end here to get a site plan, but there has been one that's been prepared that shows the way I depicted it to you. And we'll have that be a part.
Excellent.
And will GDI purchase and back the bond?
Yes.
Thank you, Terry. Any discussion amongst the commission?
Mr. President, if I may.
Please do.
One item to note is that increment up and above what's needed to pay the debt service will go to you all, will go to the town. So we can distribute that. 100% of the increment from even Fischbach Creek Business Park won't necessarily be going to pay for the debt service, okay? If there's increment up and above the amortization and the payment that's necessary, that will come to the town. You will be able to use that on projects in the Legacy Core, because this is the Legacy Core TIF that has been expanded out to include Fischbach Creek Business Park. The Legacy Core TIF would have struggled to produce any increment at all because of just the nature of the beast of where it is and what it is. So we added this industrial area to fix some of those issues. And so if he does put those 3 buildings up, I will guarantee you there will be a whole lot more increment available than what's needed just to pay the debt service that can come to you all to consider projects in the Legacy Core.
And what would that pass-through be? What is it, a 70-30 split?
Well, no, that's the pass-through of what's collected in the actual area. What I'm talking about is after what's collected, if there's increment that is left over after the debt service payment, the amortization, the payment is actually made, you will have that, you'll be able to use that excess increment to do projects in the Legacy Core or Albert S. White or 575 or wherever you deem is the best place to use it. But the TIF itself, the entire area, allocation area, only collects 70% of the potential taxes. 30% gets passed on to the taxing units themselves.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Dax. Like I've reiterated, this is, I believe, a good project for the town. It's great to have additional assessed value for the area, and it's good to have inventory. Have been a little uneasy about the high utility costs for upgrading that infrastructure for the site, and also the interconnection roads, but still think it's something worth supporting, in my opinion. But that is just one person's thoughts. With that, open up for additional discussion amongst the commission and see if everyone is comfortable with making a vote and continuing forward.
Mr. President, I would echo your concerns. I asked some questions about the utility costs, because when we look at the cost breakout, the utility costs themselves are $1.7 million of the $5 million that has been proposed, the total cost between all these categories plus the $300,000 for the park. And so that's a pretty high percentage of the bond that will be going towards those things. As I've thought about it and as we've talked, I do think that these projects are going to be very beneficial for the town, especially for the Legacy Core, which we already know once we get those storm sewers finished and all of that taken care of in the next couple of weeks, we've got a whole lot of sidewalk inventory that has to be replaced and repaired to make sure that we can connect the Legacy Core. And that's just one of many different things that are necessary for that area. So I think that these are going to be projects that will be positive for the Legacy Core, for the town. And you've already referenced multiple times the lack of inventory in the area and how putting these buildings up and getting these things off the ground will really help to attract even more businesses here. So I see many of the benefits and do share your concerns, but I think that the benefits here do outweigh those concerns, and this would be a positive thing to move forward.
Thank you. Is there a motion on the table? Anyone is willing to throw on the table?
So I will move that we adopt the resolution 2017-11.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
To go ahead and vote. So those that approve, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Terry. Bring us some
Thank you
good
again. I
business.
appreciate the support and look forward to working in the community further.
Thank you.
Next item under new business is to discuss the Whitestown Technology Park.
So Molly and I have been, from the EDC, she and I have been discussing for quite some time. We actually had a proposal at one time to present to you, but we did not, to actually design this park. And what this is actually in the comp plan as well. The land to the west of I-65 near the Indiana Car Exchange has been designated as technology, mixed-use technology, industrial of sorts in the comprehensive plan. There's a reason for that. You got Z-Works, and you got Launch Fishers, and you got Launch Greenwood, and you got a ton of these launch places. And people go in with a laptop and they design a product, and then their product makes it, and if it's not bought by Google or one of the big giants, they can actually make their product somewhere. Well, if you look around in Indiana, there's no graduate parks. So we'd like to consider the design of a graduate park, if you will. So if I'm making a gadget, if my widget finally has made it out of the works of the launch facility, and all of a sudden I need 5,000 to 10,000 square feet, it's very difficult for me to find that square footage. It's very hard to find it. Why not Whitestown be that place? So you all can do your launches. You can have the creative center where people are getting together at the speakeasy or whatever. But when you're ready to actually grow up and become a business, this is the place to come. Because what we envision is a single building for now, probably 40 to 50,000 square feet, glass front, close to the interstate, with multifamily around it, multifamily housing around it, nice park structures, all wireless capabilities, 5G. And so what I wanted to just briefly talk about is that Molly and I have been discussing it. We will likely set in front of you a proposal to fund the design of said park, which I believe, can they use increment to do that? So you all can use increment to do that. You'll probably have some excess increment by the end of the year in which to do that. We're talking probably $8,000 to $10,000 for a design, and then moving into the next stage of, do we assist in the funding of a building? Do we find a developer to help us? What's the next phase of this? I think it's a great idea. It goes right along with the goals of our comp plan, and something that I think we'd stand out. We'd be a little bit different than, because everybody always asks me, why don't you have a launch or a works or a? I said, well, everybody has a launch and a works, and now Lebanon's going to put some odd millions of dollars into a launch and a works. You got to have a place to go. And right now, what's happening is a lot of those technology companies are jumping down to downtown Indianapolis, but downtown Indianapolis is going to run out of room quick. Not to mention, the more people go down there, the higher the prices are to rent that 5,000 to 10,000 square foot space. So we can have that here in suburbia, and I think set a new standard for what's happening in Indiana. That's the discussion to start. Molly and I wanted to get at least the idea in front of you so you all can start to brainstorm as well. Likely could be a part of our workshop. Let's say we did a November workshop that talked about the RDC budget for 2018, the excess increment coming in, how the TIF areas are doing, and then we talked about the tax abatement matrix, CF1s, and then something to this nature of what's the next level of taking a redevelopment area and really turning it into something special, and that's where we are with this.
Is this something the town is looking for partners with, either different municipalities, county, or even educational entity like Purdue when they've got the research park or anything like that?
Yeah, I'd say certainly the universities to be a partner. Certainly the county, through the EDC, I would say that's how the county comes into partnership. And then it could be a regional effort.
Okay.
It'd definitely be a regional effort.
Are you talking about software launching or making a widget launching?
It can be either. So typically we're probably more talking about, it could be the advanced manufacturing space. Those spaces typically will need a little more square footage, but I've seen them where people are making 3D printing is a great example. You don't need a lot of space to do 3D printing. RegoFix is a great example of that. What they're making at RegoFix is not in a very large building. Their entire regional headquarters for North America is here, and it's in an 18,000 square foot building. So if you're doing 3D printing items, you can probably do it in 5,000 to 10,000 square feet. They're very hard to find. You have to build your own. Well, you're probably not ready as a first stage company. You're not ready to build your own. You're typically not ready to build your own until your second stage or even beyond that. So this would be a place that we constantly monitor those companies that are considering. It's really not for IP, because intellectual property typically will get developed and purchased by somebody bigger. It could be for IP if IP goes, if that goes to a different level. But somebody made a widget spinner somewhere, right? Somebody probably sitting in a desk came up with that idea, and it's probably, they're being made in, mostly in China now, and probably million-square-foot factories. But it's that kind of thing that starts somewhere. And then what you want to do is say, okay, now that you've been in this 10,000 square foot space, the Perry Industrial Park has a 400,000 square foot space because now it's crazy what's happened to you. Stay here. Keep your headquarters here. Whereas with the works and the launches, you don't hear a lot of times in Fishers that launched Fishers then turns into a 100,000 square foot industrial building in Fishers. They're not building a lot of those in Fishers. That's not happening. They're building them in Saxony, and they're building them in Plainfield, and they're building them here, and they're building them, some of them in Marion County. You don't hear a lot of times that those companies are staying. And I think Z-Works has the same issue in Zionsville, is you hear a lot of these companies that most of them are moving out of Zionsville when they make it. They're picking up and taking their products somewhere else and building it suitable because those spaces aren't suitable in our county. So, yeah, more probably advanced manufacturing folks. It could be software, it could be IP. We just have to see who's interested.
Look forward to hearing more about that.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to reiterate, as Dax was saying, this actually was a much bigger part of the comprehensive plan discussion than what really has shown out in some of the current utilization of the comp plan. You know, we're doing the low-hanging fruit right now, but this is something that's going to be a big positive for the town. We currently, I mean, you're already talking about there's not a lot of inventory out there for some of the bigger buildings, and I think Dax has given some pretty good examples of times where once you have a company that is ready to expand beyond just the sitting around a conference table coming up with things, where do they go? And that was a question we kept coming around to when talking about where do we want Whitestown to be? What do we want to have available in Whitestown? And one of the biggest conversation points that happened during the comprehensive plan, during committee processes, the General Assembly, is that we don't have a lot of 30 to 50,000 square foot buildings out there for people to take these companies into. And I think I completely agree with Dax, and that's why it played into the comprehensive plan, is having that space here is going to give companies an opportunity, even if they are in Zionsville right now, to say, hey, come on over, come across the border. We're fun people over here, and we've got the space you need to be able to succeed. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest things that we have going for us. So I think this is a great idea, and I really hope that we can bring this forward soon.
Perfect. Any more questions, comments? Great. Item C, sorry for the late addition, is a interlocal cooperative agreement between NDOT and the town of Whitestown concerning an I-65 interchange at County Road 55 South. So 550 South. So Dennis or Dax, would you mind walking us through this really quick?
Sure. This has been a long time in the making, right? When did we start this? Must have been 18 months ago.
18 months ago, yeah.
A developer came to us with a grand vision and plan for this particular area. They actually have land under contract right now for quite a magnificent mixed use that included a higher end retail development. It's not necessarily why this is in front of you, however. This is just the catalyst that started the conversation. This is in front of you because this is a need. And I can't thank NDOT enough. They've been great to work with. The commissioner has been great. His staff has been great. Our lobbyists and Dennis and Steve have worked well. We've had multiple meetings. This is needed now before it's needed then. And what I mean by that is NDOT saw that our growth will be very similar to the northeastern section of the metro and south central Hamilton, or south eastern Hamilton County. And so they had to shove the 106th Street interchange into Fishers after the fact. It was incredibly expensive because of that. What they see here is they see an opportunity to actually do this the right way, not have to spend a tremendous amount of money on ground, and not have to put anybody out by developing an interchange when there's already development going around it. To do it first and to have it be an economic development tool, to be a draw, and not a detriment. And so I think it's great planning on their part and our part. We've gone back and forth multiple times. What this agreement basically says, and this is where you may need to help me. We will sign this MOU with NDOT. We will agree to, you all will agree to pledging creating a TIF, pledging 50% of the increment from that TIF up to 10 million? Up to $10 million for what's the time period?
It's the shorter of the life of the TIF or when they've been repaid from that 50%.
Yes.
So 25 years max.
25 years max. If, and this is the kick, this is the good thing, if development happens in the TIF. So if you get, what we're basically saying is we're not pledging increment that we don't have, that they're going to hold us to the fire to give them, and they know that that doesn't work anyway. Essentially, they're agreeing to build a piece of infrastructure that we know that we need and they know we need proactively. We are pledging to them that, hey, you know what, if you build this, we will go into a partnership with you, and we think there will be development, and because of this interchange, we will TIF that, we will collect increment, and we will pay you over the course of 25 years at max up to $10 million in assistance to build the interchange. I can't think of a better agreement. I can't, you probably won't find a better agreement. I think that development will happen. I think increment will come in, and I think that we will actually be funding a portion of this, and I think that's a great partnership between the town and NDOT, which they're already great. They're already super partners with us, and so I'm fully in support of this. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, and Dex, and the only thing I would add to that is I think this is a magnificent agreement. I try not to normally give my opinions on things because that's your job here, but where we started on this, we were looking at doing a bond issue that would have carried an interest rate and that would have had backing of the town, property tax backing, to find a buyer for those bonds, or a letter of credit from a developer that would have been extremely expensive. Where we've now, with 100% TIF pledge, where we've now ended up is 50% of real property pledge with no real risk to the town. Just, hey, if it generates 10 million with no interest expense on that, so that's 0% interest on that. And if the growth really goes, this thing could be paid off really quickly, or if it doesn't happen, hey, you've got an interchange, but town's not, taxpayers aren't out a dime. It's a great deal.
Yeah, so NDOT's using we're not having to bond.
Yeah, and it's real property. It's not the person, you save the personal property.
Yeah,
too.
it's just amazing.
Does it specify what kind of development is, you just said real property, but is it as industrial, retail, commercial?
No.
Yeah.
No.
And I don't even know, did we ever share maps with them of what this area, I mean, I think they have an idea of what the TIF area boundaries will look like, but I think,
Both sides of the interstate.
yeah.
It's a great deal. It's a great deal.
I know this is short notice, but does anyone have any questions or feel comfortable with moving forward on this tonight?
Oh, I feel comfortable moving forward with this tonight. I mean, what we're talking about is that if we get nothing, we give them nothing. And whatever we come up with, we give them half, which means we get half to be utilized for different projects to help us in the area. So I think this is a wonderful deal, tremendous deal, and so I think it's something that would be good to move forward.
Our town of 8,000 is about to have 3 interchanges off I-65.
I think it's needed,
Absolutely.
definitely needed.
With all that in mind, we'll look to entertain a motion to move forward with the interlocal agreement with NDOT in the town of Whitestown.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second that.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say, nay.
Councilman, I'll make the last one as fast as I can. Although I must say, he's really pretty amazing.
And the last item on the agenda, item D, is the agreements related to a special economic development alcohol beverage permit application.
This is pretty standard. So there's nothing in that agreement, although it's a lot of legalese. Those are basically the commitments of Noble Romans for receiving one of the economic development liquor licenses. If you remember, in 2016, the legislature worked with the town to, I think it was 16, maybe even 15. No, it was 16. It was the legislative session of 2016. Worked with the town to pass legislation to create special economic development liquor licenses because of our shortage. It gave 6 communities were listed in the bill. Whitestown, Fishers, Carmel, Zionsville, Lebanon, and I can't remember the sixth.
Yeah, I don't know.
It'll come to me. Westfield. The opportunity to create these 4 per community special economic development liquor permits. The difference of these is it does not go through the county ABC or whatever we're calling it now. It goes actually through the town council, the town redevelopment commission, back to the state ATC, and then they get their license. Another difference is it's $40,000 flat fee. It's a 3-way, and it has to be purchased and obtained by the occupier or the lessee, not the lessor. So we thought it was a great bill. This will be the first one that's been used. I'm happy that it's been used because I'm sure Senator Alting will start asking me since he was really the carrier of this, and he's a great senator. In our ordinance and in the state statute, it states they have to get approval from the council and the redevelopment commission, and then this is part of, these are commitments from them that they're going to build, they're going to have, it's going to be held by noble Romans. They'll safely serve alcohol, all those typical commitments. The council has unanimously approved it, and it's just in front of you for approval as well. They've already started the process of getting their permit from the ATC, and they're just waiting on this last step.
And since this is new for the RDC to even talk about alcohol permits for the remaining, well, I guess for this and then also the additional 3, is this something that we're going to see in front of the commission every single time?
Yeah, each time somebody comes in and files to obtain one of these, which there's 3 left, you'll see this very document.
And is that the only approval process, or does it have to go to the council as well, or?
Each time it has to go to the council and to the redevelopment commission because these licenses have to be inside of a redevelopment area. So you will see these each time that they're applied for. You will not see from the special census, we got 4 of each. So there are additional 3-way licenses. You will not see that because that goes through the typical census-driven, population-driven county auction process. You'll have nothing to do with that. These you will. We're asking the legislature, I think we'll probably ask in the 27 in the short session next year, we'll ask them to actually add 2 additional licenses onto this, so that based on growth percentage. So for every year that you grow 5% or more, you get 2 additional, and that we think our growth will be around 11 to 12% this year, and probably 11 to 12% next year.
So there's 3 available, and through this program, is there another program outside of this that the business can still obtain?
Yeah, so here's how liquor licenses work, and here's why this was vital. Unfortunately, it's a very archaic system in Indiana. Liquor licenses are based on population. So for every 1,500 people, you get 1 of each of the major licenses for every increment of 1,500. What the census, in the 2010 census, Whitestown had 2,800 people, which means we got 2 increments, right? Because we had not gone over into the 3,000. So we only got, I can't remember how many were available, but we had run out of all available licenses in mid-2015. So businesses were coming, everybody asked, why don't we have any sit-down restaurants? Well, the Tow Yard or the Yard House or the Applebee's can't come here because they can't get a 3-way permit because based on antiquated state law, it was based on our 2,800 people of population. So we did a special census. One reason we spent that money was because of the liquor license issue. So when the special census came back at 7,800, you get 1 for the increment between when you hit 3,000, 1 for the increment when you hit 4,500, 1 for the increment when you hit 6,000, and 1 for the increment when you hit 7,500. And we believe, and we're going back and forth here, that we get 1 because we're into the 78, we're into the next increment. So there's some questions on whether we get 4 or 5, as a matter of fact, of 3-way, 2-way, and then beer and wine only, or beer only, or wine only. So there's 2 different, but the reason why we did this was Simon was looking at an outlet type center on the 47 acres in Anson, which is now the Realty Link shops at Whitestown. One reason, and one very big reason they pulled out, they wanted 12 liquor permits. because they were going to bring in all those restaurants I just said. They were going to try to bring in those millennial-driven brew pub type restaurants that are focused around food and alcohol, because that's the new thing. That's what foodies want in this day and age. I mean, even Starbucks was interested in us, but they were going to be one of the Starbucks that served beer, and we didn't have any available beer-only licenses. So I went to the legislature, and that's pretty much where it ended up. And I thought it was a great bill that they gave us a temporary Band-Aid with the 4 licenses. But the population-driven licenses through the county cost about $1,000 an auction. These licenses cost $40,000. Senator Alting wanted to make sure that the businesses were really understood what they were getting into, that they were going to be responsible with the license, and for 40 grand, it sounds like Noble Roman's in it to win it. So.
Thank you,
Okay.
Max.
So we have an agreement in front of us, which is Noble Roman's Craft Pizza and Pub, looking for the special economic development alcohol beverage permit. Would like to entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to adopt the special alcohol permit.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Would like to go ahead and open for a vote. So those that approve, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, say abstain, or say nay, excuse me. Motion carries. I'd like to thank Adam for joining us for your first meeting on the RDC. We're excited to have you. With that, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
First, second, let's get out of here.